Welcome, everybody, to the Independence Day Eve edition of In Other News. I'm so glad you're joining me. Independence Day, means different things to different people. The official meaning, obviously, marks the occasion on which the U.S. declared its independence from Britain in 1776. But for many of our ancestors, it was not independence or freedom or anything like that. We had 100 more years of enslavement, and then there is a very valid argument to be made that we still don't have 100% freedom. But Independence Day could also mean, in my experience, or how I want to twist it today, I guess that's one way to put it, since this podcast is about truth, got to have some fun, and relates to Blackness in some way all the time. Independence Day, how about being independent from things that are controlling you in a negative way? And that could be a whole bunch of things. That could be, so I'm talking habits, I'm talking addictions, and I know it's a spectrum, right? It's not, either you have it or you don't. But it could be drugs and alcohol, that which we are most familiar with, or it could be food, it could be shopping, it could be anything that controls you as opposed to you controlling it and has a negative outcome. I guess I'm going to ask some professionals if that's a good definition of of addiction, and that can mean people sometimes who are alcoholics or say they are alcoholics or present as alcoholics don't think of it the same as being an addict. Alcohol, however, is the number one thing that people are addicted to, maybe because it's so available. I know that when I quit smoking last year, yay, whoop, whoop for me, it's a lot easier because you're no longer smoking in bars, you're no longer smoking hardly on the street. I remember a time when you were smoking on an airplane. I wonder how they divided that air between the non-smoking and the smoking section. But it was certainly a terrible addiction, and it was, obviously it was like slow suicide, but it's legal, and you don't have to hide to do it necessarily. That's the thing about alcohol. It's so prevalent. And oftentimes there's so much stigma around saying that you are being controlled by something, you are dependent upon something. So people don't do it, even when they recognize that maybe it's going further than is healthy. And so I, I at one time did reveal, and I do readily to this day, but I did a series on television about my brother's struggle with heroin addiction, which led to his death ultimately from AIDS. That was back before there were, treatments, effective prevention, anything. I mean, people were dying of AIDS, and he was one of the early patients, AIDS patients, because of his intravenous drug use and addiction. Meanwhile, my cousin had a brother the exact same age as my brother who went through the exact same thing. And we could talk about it with each other. But at that time, you didn't talk about it in, mixed company, certainly not in public. It's just there's so much stigma associated with it. So when I did this story, I always have said, and this is still it's the truth, I've never gotten more response from viewers than I did when I did that story about my brother and his addiction to heroin. As it turns out, most people, I'm not going to say everybody, but most people know or love someone who is dependent upon something that is wrecking their life, right? And so people could relate to it. So I say, put some sunshine on it. Let's not make an assumption about what an alcoholic looks like, or what an addict looks like, or what a person, suffering from food addiction looks like. And then my cousin, who also lost her brother, he also died. She came out, I guess it might be the right word, as an alcoholic later. And when I tell you, this cousin of mine is someone I had looked up to all my life. She was always the beautiful one, the confident one. She had charisma. She was smooth, and I was kind of tomboyish and clumsy, and we had a friendship beyond anything that I don't even know how to describe it, but I really looked up to her and thought she had it all together. She had everything. And to find out that, in fact, she had a drinking problem, kind of surprised me, because, as I said, we have a certain stereotype in our head as to what that looks like. And I think that stigma keeps people from recognizing or getting help. And so my cousin has agreed to join me today so we can talk about how to destigmatize, what we should do if we suspect something is keeping us from being independent and doing what we want to do on this Independence Day Eve. I thought it'd be a good conversation to have. We're taking it out of the patriotic realm and into the personal. So I'm going to introduce you to my beautiful cousin. All right. So
Yeah,
we are in. So good to see you. We live 2,000 miles away from each other. We spent most of our young life living about 60 miles away from each other, but we made that 60-mile trek. Our poor parents, they burnt the 10 freeway up getting from Claremont to Los Angeles. So Jan, I am so happy that you're joining me. We have talked for a long time about our kind of parallel lives with our brothers who suffered from addiction. And on this Independence Day Eve podcast, though it'll, live beyond the 4th of July, um, I want to talk about being independent from things that control you in a negative way, and how all my life you were somebody, girl, I looked at you, you had everything. You were beautiful, you were smart, so much charisma. You could just, the whole room would listen to everything you said. It was incredible. I used to say, people say, I'm going into news and my cousin Jan is going to have a talk show. Okay. Because that's just who you were, how you were. How are you, first of all, today?
I'm good. Thank you so much, Robin. Thank you for this platform um, to allow people to have some understanding of something so confusing and to and become not dependent on stuff.
Right. Especially,
Stuff.
yeah, stuff that's not helping you, but it feels like it's helping you. So let's talk about um, how did you decide this is not just a hobby? This is something drinking, right? So, and we are going, when I say, people being independent from things that are controlling them in a negative way, that I'm talking the whole gamut. I know it's not all the same, but I think there are some similarities between being controlled by something, right? So first of all, when you told me I'm an alcoholic, I said, no, you are not. What are you talking about? I mean, it was such a surprise to me, what was going on with you, because I thought, like I said, from the outside, you looked like you had everything.
I did a good job. Um, that's what I was supposed to do. I was tricking people. I um, I I often I didn't know that I needed so much help in
Mm.
my life, just breathing and getting up in that household that you thought was fabulous. It was difficult. It was a very difficult place. I had two siblings, and my father was a prominent medical doctor, and my mother had the toughest job in the house. She was his wife, and he was alcoholic. And
And he
and so
was,
was my sister and my brother.
so let's say when you said your father was a prominent doctor, your father delivered my baby sister and
Right.
was her godfather. And never would we have suspected that there was anything but perfection there in my uncle. I mean, it wasn't easy to be a black doctor back then. You're talking the 1950s, early 60s. So I'm not giving him an excuse for being an alcoholic. I'm saying it was very well hidden outside the home.
Yeah, we looked good on snapshots and we looked good. But it felt that bad. It as good as it looked, it felt that bad. And at my young age, when I was 5, when I was 7, I didn't know that I felt um, uh, neglected. I
Mm.
didn't know that I felt afraid. I never, I didn't feel safe and I didn't feel secure. And the only thing I felt was frightened. I was frightened all the time of everything.
Wow. But then when you got older, right, and we went into those teen years, and let's be clear, we were teenagers in the 80s. So there was a whole lot of overindulgence of a whole lot of things going on. So I think if I thought anything that we were going to fall victim to, I would not have guessed drinking. I would have guessed cocaine. I would have guessed, some of the other things that were going around. People dropping reds and whites and all kinds of things, it was just prevalent. Drugs have been dropped into our neighborhoods in huge volumes. And we know a lot of people who didn't make it out. But when did you decide that drinking was not just something you enjoyed doing every now and then? It was not a hobby, it was a habit.
My drinking and using, because I was one of those people that took Red Devils and drank them down with wine. I also hid my Red Devils in the sandbox at an elementary school in Windsor Hills.
That young.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, so I don't know really where it happened. Um, they talk about an invisible line. Well, it surely is invisible. But I know that I needed to not be me. I changed my my ID card so I could have a different name. I just wanted to not be me. It worked until it didn't work. And I didn't know that it didn't. Other people around me, people like me, are usually the last to know. Other people had decided that I had a problem.
How does that work? Because we all know somebody that we'd like to pull their coattail and say, you know what? Seem like you drinking a little too much or smoking a little, whatever it might be, eating a little too much. I mean, how do you do that intervention without losing a friend? What do you suggest a person does that cares about someone who they think is crossed the invisible line, as you say?
What happened for me is a girl that really wasn't my friend. She was her brother and my brother were friends, and
Uh,
they used to OD and bring each other back. And so she really wasn't my friend, but she came over to my house one day. And the next day she said, I'm going to come and get you. And because I didn't have a car at all. And she said, I'm going to come and get you and we'll go to my house and have lunch. And so she did. She picked me up and where we went wasn't her house. I went to it was a parking lot and I was very familiar with the Crenshaw area. And we went to an AA meeting. And I didn't want to be a part of it because I had already stopped doing all the things that would concern somebody as far as I was concerned. If I stopped using dope, then I was fine. I was only drinking wine. I love champagne. That's all I was doing. So I felt like she should really mind her business. And why was I at this meeting? Because I'm doing fine.
When you went there, did you reject it? Did you find something something that said maybe this is where I need to be?
Well, I said I was at Crenshaw, and so it was my neighborhood. It was my people. So uh, I just kind of felt sorry for them. When I went upstairs, I was listening to them, and they were just telling their business, and I just felt sorry for them. They were saying things with a microphone in front of them, talking about peeing in their closet and just horrible things that certainly I had never heard from from some. Why would somebody say that about their family? And they
Hmm.
did it freely, freely. And although I was saying, "Oh, that was terrible," a lot of things I could really identify, with, and I kept going back with her every day.
Wow.
I kept drinking,
Okay.
kept going back.
But eventually you stopped because you are now how many years sober?
August 1st, I'll celebrate 38 years. I'm
Wow.
37 years old.
You are a very early adapter of alcohol, right? So
Yeah.
38, congratulations, first of all. And I think that brings me to a question I think a lot of people have, which is, well, hell, if you after I can't no longer have a drink, how am I going to enjoy life? What kind of life is that?
Well, they say we are not a glum lot, and we're not. Um, Something happened when I kept going back, and it happened about my fifth month of sobriety. I mean, I'm sorry, my fifth month of attending meetings, and something happened, and I know what happened. I came to one morning, and there was a television show on with a guy. They were preaching and all this kind of stuff, he said if you're caught in any type of bondage, may it be alcohol, cocaine, marijuana, Valium, cigarettes, whatever it is, extend your hand toward the TV and pray with me now, and you'll be relieved of that bondage. And from that day to this, I haven't had another drink. And I always had a drink next to my bed. But I kept going back to meetings. And I realized while in that meeting and while not drinking anymore that I had a hard time dealing with how I felt. And I thought that their master design program for living might help me. So I started paying attention. I started doing what they did. I live with the disease. I don't suffer from the disease. I live with the disease, and I live with the disease because I do what's suggested over and over and over and over. And I help other people. That's what I do. I believe that's my purpose, is to help other people.
Because you've become very active in the recovery community. And how does that feel to help other people on this kind of journey?
No, there's nothing better. There's nothing better than to extend my hand and someone holds my hand and they trust me. Because I know about feeling safe, secure, and protected. And I work with a lot of women, but I've worked in men's jails. I've worked with a lot of people across the board. And there's nothing more rewarding in my life that I've ever done. I believe that that's why I still live. I did all the things that make me not live any longer, or at least live in jail.
Okay, you had some close
But
calls. Mhm.
yeah. But I don't live like that anymore, and this is the best. This is the best. So I might be the only book somebody's able to read, and I hope that you could hear me say that um, that the best is still in front of me, and I know that I'm on a good path because I can check my rearview mirror and I can see where I've come from. And my rearview mirror is the only place where I have 20/20 vision, and it's good. It's
That's
good. I don't have to do that again. I can always do this again.
well, happy Independence Day. And
Thank
I'm happy to be independent with you. Jan, my cousin, talking about being free of the things that are controlling you in a negative way.
if you choose to benefit from this, because freedom ain't free. You got to work for it. Freedom ain't free.
Thank you much. Have a great day. Love you.
Love you too.
I mean, I really love you.